Welcome back, Wolfpack. Verliser to a VGC 2016 guide for Palkia. So the Palkia guide is going to be very simple and probably not that long of a video because Spacial Rend is too good and Palkia itself isn't that fantastic. Spacial Rend, 100 base power dragon type move, gets stabbed, works with Lustrous Orb, also works with Life Orb and everything like that. High critical hit ratio doesn't really matter too much, like you shouldn't bank on the crits, but it just shows like Spacial Rend, going to be an amazing move. Then you also get Hydro Pump, so pretty much you're going to be playing like a Dialga in a lot of similar ways, that you get crazy amounts of coverage. Now, one thing I didn't mention on the Dialga in the last video, Power Gem. If you're going up against something like a Charizard Y or Talonflame, Power Gem is something you might want to consider. It's like not the most fantastic move, but also at the same time, you get Ice, Electric, Fire. You get all kinds of rainbow colors of coverage and stuff. You also have the Earth Power and stuff like that. The only difference is you're not going to be killing fairies with Palkia. You're just going to be using Hydro Pump for ridiculous amounts of damage. But again, Spacial Rend is just too good that it comes down to really small numbers. Hydro Pump, it only has 110 base power and much less accuracy. I consider 15% a pretty substantial chunk of accuracy loss, so you're not really losing on too much damage compared to the Spacial Rend. So even with Hydro Pump, depending on what you're matching up against, Surf could be a good damage option as well. You're hitting both opponents. If you're looking for super effective hits, the super effective Surf is going to knock out anyways, and Spacial Rend would have just been the more consistent option, unless you want to gamble. If you want to gamble a bit more, Hydro Pump works. If you want to run the Protect, you can go for that, but then you're just looking for that last little bit of coverage that your team doesn't have. Palkia does work in a couple of good ways though. It has 100 base speed, so it's faster than Dialga, it's faster than a lot of the Pokemon we commonly see, and it speed ties with a lot of them as well. Other than that, Thunder, Ice Beam, whatever else you want to run, it's going to be all about the matchups. And the problem is that, like I said, Spacial Rend is too good for a lot of the other moves. Say if we're going to be going up against a Pokemon like Mega Rayquaza, well, Spacial Rend KOs. That's it. No reason to worry about the Ice Beam, no reason to do any of that, because with Ice Beam, you're looking for those Dragon-type 4-time super effective hits, so you don't really need to run it if Spacial Rend is just destroying everything anyways. Now, it will be an interesting matchup because Dragon's Ascent is going to outspeed and do a lot of damage to your Palkia, so maybe Reflect. If you have like Reflect Light Screen, turn it into that bulkier Pokemon. Give it the effective defenses of a Dialga that's just speedier and throwing out a bit more reliable damage on that Spacial Rend. That can work out pretty well. So that's kind of what you're playing with here, that you might need to just support it with tankiness and try to keep the Rayquaza down just long enough to where you can knock it out or something like that. But you will find good outspeeds. If it megas and it doesn't protect on the first turn, you might surprise it with just Spacial Rend KO if you get off of their disrespect like that. Against the Primal Kyogre, this is where you can run Thunder, but as you can see, it doesn't get close to KOing either ways. At least with Thunder, it's a 2-hit KO. And Origin Pulse, Thunder, Ice Beam, Kyogre's moveset doesn't really threaten you too much. As a Water Dragon, you get to do really well against a lot of what's throwing out. It's just neutral or resisted, and its best option against you is going to be Thunder. But you're outspeeding it, and you're doing more damage, so you do win that matchup pretty well. And then it starts getting kind of funny. Primal Groudon. Well, you can run as something as simple as the Water Pulse and an ability suppression. That if you have a Cloud9 Pokemon next to your Palkia, you just get to throw out the Water Pulse and knock out a Primal Groudon. You outspeed it, you do good, and that's going to be pretty effective right there. But this is where Surf comes into play. If you're just looking for super effective hits against Fire-type Pokemon, Ground-type Pokemon, just throw out the Surf. Hit both opponents, maybe have a Protect or Telepathy Pokemon next to you, and GG. Like, you're just going to be able to get the good damage. Now, you will need the ability suppression, so Worry Seed. Palkia next to a Mega Rayquaza could be pretty nice because it just makes it to where they can't do any weird weather stuff, and you're still relatively fast, throwing out good amounts of damage. Like the Spacial Rend neutral would be a 2-shot, and that's kind of how Palkia wants to play. It just wants to barely survive enough to not get 1-shot, and then it wants to 2-shot faster with a Spacial Rend, and maybe have damage support or a lot of tankiness support. That way it can keep rolling over the opponent's team. And then we're just starting to get into some other things. So you get Aura Sphere. Aura Sphere isn't going to 1-hit KO a Kangaskhan, so it's not really too crazy, but Spacial Rend. Spacial Rend, since it has the 100 base power, a super effective Aura Sphere, a super effective move that doesn't have 90 base power, like one in that 80 base power range, so super effective Earthquake. It's going to be doing slightly more than a neutral Spacial Rend, so in these damage calculations don't really come through. It's not like there's a very specific Pokemon where Spacial Rend doesn't KO, and then there's like 10% more damage where the Aura Sphere, where the Earth Power KOs. Those just don't really exist in this meta right now. So you really just have to go for the very specifics, or run the Flamethrower, run the Thunderbolt, run something that's going to give you more damage. That way the difference is a lot larger. Hydro Pump's still a good amount of damage as well. I mean, 110. So, I mean, the neutral stab, 110. It's going to be a bit more of a risk. If you want to just play that 20% miss gamble, yeah, you get more damage than even the super effective Aura Sphere, the super effective Earth Power. So against Aegislash is really the only place where Earth Power gets some kind of meaning, because you have that 120 base special defense. Aegislash special attacking you doesn't do much of anything because Flash Cannon's resisted, and Shadow Ball isn't that crazy of a hit as long as you haven't like procced a weakness policy or anything up until that point. Even with the weakness policy, even if it's at that +2, it doesn't have a super reliable way of KOing you with it, and you can still get solid Fire Blast or Earth Power damage. And when we start to break it down, say we have a Heatran, well, that's going to be Steel and Fire, so you can just hit it with a Water type attack. If they have a Ground Steel Pokemon, you hit it with a Water type attack instead as well. So it's only those Pokemon that resist your Spacial Rend, potentially resisting the Hydro Pump, and only make it to where Earth Power is the better option. There's not too many of them. If we're running the Lustrous Orb, then we're going to get more damage off that Hydro Pump instead of the Earth Power against a Pokemon like Aegislash, but we can also run the Fire Blast. Fire Blast does carry good utility against Pokemon like Ferrothorn, Pokemon like Caesar. That's going to be a Life Orb move for sure, but even then, like, do we want to play that kind of RNG based game with the Flamethrower and the Life Orb? We're going to have good chances of just two-shotting it anyways, while also resisting really well, as long as they haven't procced a weakness policy. So we do have to play safe around that. Hydro Pump is technically a safer move. You use it, doesn't proc weakness policy, you use it again, or that's when you can go for the Flamethrower to secure the hit with better odds. But these are just our Palkia matchups. Do I have anything else right here? Mega Salamence. You endure a lot of its hits. Dragon Claw, very low chance of one-hit KOing you. Double Edge doesn't have that high of a chance. And then you just destroy it with a Spacial Rend. So a lot of your matchups, it just boils down to, does Spacial Rend work? Yes. Do you have that one coverage move that works against tons of Pokemon? Like, here's the thing, when you set Palkia on your team, you don't know what Pokemon are going to be on all of your opponent's teams. That you might find situations where you're going, darn, I wish I had Earth Power. Darn, I wish I had Thunder. Darn, I wish I had Fire Blast. But you're never going to be ready for everything you see with the Palkia. But sometimes it's also really consistent because you're outspeeding a lot, you're speed tying a lot of common Pokemon. Spacial Rend can tear through Pokemon. We're forgetting that you also have a second Pokemon next to you. If that's hitting with double hitting, like it's hitting both of your opponents, that's solid damage. So Spacial Rend knocks out, chunk a lot of damage, and you can just alternate. So the Pokemon that you didn't hit last turn, you finish it off, and you can just kind of swing through your opponent's team pretty effectively like that. But it's going to be a really basic Pokemon. You outspeed, you run the coverage that feels right, and then you maybe win. Palkia also has like some other stuff that you can maybe run that you might see the Thunder Wave. Actually, that's kind of it. So yeah, it's going to be just your stab into Lustrous Orb or Life Orb, and then one or two coverage moves, depending if they're running the Protect or not, and then you just pray you outspeed everything. So it's really good at shredding tanks like that. It's really good at hitting those really hard hits, and that's going to be Palkia. So if you guys enjoyed the video, I hope you all have a nice day. Thank you for watching.